Yu-Gi-Oh is dying.
Why is Yu-Gi-Oh dying,
Yu-Gi-Oh is
Ruxin?
struggling. How are we gonna fix it? I think I found a solution in this video, but first we have to recap what's going on.
Yu-Gi-Oh might be dying.
Master Duel is destroying the TCG.
If they don't reverse course
Master
within the next
Drool.
year, I do think we actually could be in the Yu-Gi-Oh is dying conversation.
Box prices are too low. Players aren't playing the TCG like they used to, and stores are not carrying Yu-Gi-Oh anymore. I have a vested interest in Yu-Gi-Oh survival, as well as being a big fan of the game, obviously. So how can Konami fix this? Prices of current boxes has been a big topic online, and I think current product failing out of the gate is concerning. Improving new product will help Yu-Gi-Oh sustain itself in the long run, but how does Yu-Gi-Oh product get better? How does Konami make Yu-Gi-Oh product as popular as Pokemon's Destined Rivals or Magic's Final Fantasy? Those franchises have found a way to keep not only the players of their game, but also the collectors of their game interested in buying product. Yu-Gi-Oh has struggled to do this with recent product. If staples don't have a new powerful archetype, the boxes flop. And when boxes flop, stores have bought in months earlier at a certain cost, and they then have to sell those boxes at a loss. And with that happening over and over, some stores have just stepped away from Yu-Gi-Oh because they know most of their releases are going to lose them money. And one reason I believe that boxes are flopping is Rarity Collection 1 through 4 made staples affordable. So sprinkling a Triple Tactics Talents into a new set
I can see the camera light in his eyes.
that doesn't boost a new box like it once did. And this is a side note because I know the comments are going to single that comment out. Affordable staples is a good thing. I'm not saying we need the staples to be really expensive, but it is a fact on how it impacts new boxes. Because if you can't just throw in a previously $70 card into a box to sell the box because
Looks
people
like a
want that
ring light.
$70 card's reprint.
Thankfully,
then
he's
that
not
box is
using a
less
ring light.
desirable because it doesn't have the reprint of the $70 card anymore. Those cards are much cheaper now because they've been reprinted in Rarity Collection. So if you throw in Triple Tactics Talents now, it's kind of just a nice card you might get rather than a card that you used to have to pay $200 for a playset of. And sure, adding the newest Blue Eyes White Dragon or Dark Magician Girl reprint to a new set or reprinting an old set like Retro Pack will keep people like me and other boomers interested, but how long can you keep reprinting the same cards and sets
Censor Dark
before
Magician
even
Girl.
the boomers get bored? I guess right now the current answer is 25 years, but how much longer will it keep going? Because right now more and more collectors are leaving the game. The constant reprinting makes it hard to collect higher end cards. Starlights were extremely popular as a collectible because people who collected them knew they were extremely hard to pull and didn't expect them to have a high rarity reprint. I really liked the Starlight method because Starlight rares were extremely hard to pull, and they also weren't the only version of the card other than QCR Dragon Master Magi. I know it's a different rarity, but they didn't do that with Starlights. They had the low rarity
I don't know what a
version,
Starlight
Secret,
is.
Ultra, Super, whatever it was, and then they had the high rarity Starlight. So if you wanted the staple card for your deck, you could get that lower end version, and if you wanted the Starlight
who
rare
wants
as like
to
a
buy
really
the
cool
censored
collectible,
Dark Magician
you could
Girl?
invest in that. You didn't need that high rarity card for your deck to actually play it, which is the perfect split in my opinion. You have something collectible, something really cool that costs a
Genius
lot, and you
idea,
have
sell
something
the
a lot
uncensored
cheaper
arts,
that you actually use to
right?
play the actual game. So if you don't want to necessarily bling out your deck with tons of Starlights, you have that cheaper option to actually still play the
Starlights
game.
with these fancy hollows that you pull only every two
Problem
boxes.
was, Konami decided that they
Oh.
wanted to reprint all of these high rarity cards, not necessarily in the Starlight rarity, but in a quarter century rarity, which I think everyone can agree is a very similar rarity. It's not the same rarity, but it looks a lot like the other one. And in doing
Yeah,
this,
the
they
swimsuit
absolutely
rarity.
crashed the market of those collectible high rarity Starlight cards. And I know a lot of you guys are watching this thinking, boo hoo.
Oh, the
rich
sparkly
people lost
rarity.
money. It's not necessarily that these people were rich. It's just collectors that enjoyed. Maybe they pulled the card. They opened a box and they got that Starlight rare and they wanted to keep it because it was rare and it was cool. And it was like $1,000 for Effect Veiler or for Apollosa or whatever. And then it gets the reprint, it goes down to $200. So they just lose that money because they're an actual collector rather than someone that's just flipping cards. Because someone who's just flipping cards, they pull the $1,000, they sell it. So you're punishing the actual people who care about the cards and like the rare cards by reprinting those cards in the high rarities. So I think that there's a little bit of an issue with that. The collectors were getting burned so hard that they decided, I can't do this anymore. Like I'm holding on to these high rarity cards and I get burned for it. I lose, 80% of my value when they release the QCR version of it. I know I specifically stopped keeping Starlights unless it was a card that I was specifically searching for, like the Starlight Stardust or the Magia or something like that. I would immediately sell them because I knew they were going to
This
get a
one's still
QCR
expensive.
reprint or some sort of other alt art or something like that that was going to crash the value. And it was sad because I did want to keep the cards, but monetarily, it made no sense. If you have an $800 card and you know it's going to be $100 in a year, it just doesn't make sense to keep it. And it is a little bit of a bummer the way that works. But even in Yu-Gi-Oh's current state, I have found ways to really enjoy collecting cards. And as I said, I'm not really collecting the Starlights or the QCRs unless the specific cards I'm going for on streams or completing full sets or whatever that is. There were other ways for me to enjoy collecting. One of my absolute favorite ways to collect Yu-Gi-Oh now is through old formats, namely
Magic
GOAT and Edison
Ruler.
format. Max rarity decks is really fun because not only do I collect and own the beautiful cards, but I also get to play them in tournaments like I did at the R-Bet in Indianapolis. And that brings me to the Time Wizard drama. If you want the full version of what's happened with the Time Wizard drama, go check out my second channel, Ruxin Live. It'll be up on the screen. Just type in Ruxin Live, it'll come up. So if you want a more in-depth version, I'm going to do a quick recap here, but it's very quick. So go check that out if you want more context. Recently, Konami has shut down Time Wizard events in North America multiple times. While Konami Europe seems to be continuing these events, the future of North American Ultimate Time Wizard and even Time Wizard at the local level is uncertain. The main reason people believe that Konami is attempting to cut off these events is due to profitability. Time Wizard just does not sell as much as standard Yu-Gi-Oh! The key phrase in there is as much. Time Wizard is a bunch of set formats. It's old school Yu-Gi-Oh! It's 2005 Yu-Gi-Oh! It's 2010 Yu-Gi-Oh!
Cards.
So Konami can't just print new cards into this format. They can only reprint the cards already in that format, which is not nearly as profitable as printing new cards over and over and selling them to new or existing customers. They can continue to reprint cards from Time Wizard format, but the problem with that is eventually there are enough reprints where nothing is really expensive and nobody really needs to buy the new set for the reprint because they've already reprinted everything for the most part. So there is a breaking point to that strategy, and I think they see that happening down the line, so they don't even want to get to that point. Their decisions with Time Wizard have been so disappointing for me and many others because, as I mentioned previously, Time Wizard provides a way to play with cards I've been collecting, and it also brings me back to older Yu-Gi-Oh!, which I absolutely love and I know thousands of others do as well. So how do we fix this problem? And in turn, potentially fix Yu-Gi-Oh! In general as well. I've come up with an idea that will probably never happen, but I think would improve current product, bring back former players, and keep collectors engaged in not just collecting cards, but playing with them as well. So here is my idea. Konami starts a new format. Okay, yeah, I know, not that revolutionary. They've tried this with Speed Duel. They've tried it with Rush Duel, though we still don't have Rush Duel except in Duel Links in the United States. I know they have it over in Japan, and a couple other times, I'm sure. But I want them to do it a little differently this time. The other formats that currently exist are different from standard or advanced or whatever it's actually called, the current Yu-Gi-Oh! Format. Duel Links only has 3 zones, so naturally it's completely different. It's a much quicker game, and most of the time it's played on your, Duel Links is on your phone. Speed Duel they tried to do with the TCG. It just doesn't work as well as Duel Links because Duel Links was made to have a quick 10 to 15 minute game on your phone and get out. Rush Duel allows infinite normal summons, so you're already playing a completely different game than you would if you were playing, regular Yu-Gi-Oh! You get one normal summon. Sure, I guess now you get to special summon a million times, but normal summoning 5 is a lot easier than special summoning 5 because you have to have conditions for a lot of those. No, not with normal summons. You just summon them. The only thing you have to worry about is stars. I think these two formats, both having a pretty significant difference from the advanced format, is the reason why they're not so popular. So instead, Konami should start a new format that resonates. A format where Yu-Gi-Oh! Is played like Yu-Gi-Oh! A format that will bring back former players and keep them engaged in both new releases and new cards. I've called it Yu-Gi-Oh! Retro. Okay, the name could use some work. That's not the important part here. I want this name to scream to old players, boomers, and collectors that this is the Yu-Gi-Oh! They remember. And no, this will not be Time Wizard or time travel. This won't be just visiting old formats and old cards, though I do love that and I think it's awesome. Konami has clearly shown us that they think there's a problem with supporting that old school format. Instead, I've thought of something better for you, Konami, a way you can make money and keep old school players interested, as well as bringing in old school players that haven't played in a while. Konami would just release new sets specifically for this format, just like they did with Speed Duel. But instead of just releasing old cards, but in a different order, just to make them a new format, Konami would print new cards specifically for this format and mix them in with current cards. For example, this set might contain some original cards to build up the format, such as Trap Hole, Smashing Ground, or Mystic Tomato. But alongside these cards, they might create a whole new card, like a level 4 Machine Recruiter. And yeah, I was hating on UFO Road right there. I was. Or even a whole new type or attribute of monsters to go along with these vintage cards that interacts in different ways that we've never seen before. But at the same time also has an old school feel. From there, they could continue to release new sets, solving their issue with Time Wizard of selling old school players new product, while also providing a new format using vintage cards for those older players. This idea really resonates with me because I personally got back into Yu-Gi-Oh! In 2017 because of Duel Links. Back then, the game was so simple that it was easy for me to
Oh! I was like, what's wrong with UFO Roid? But, like, they don't have recruiters for specific types. They have recruiters for attributes. So, like, UFO Roid being level 6, like, it sucks, but, you know, the other types don't have one.
Transition my basic knowledge I had in 2006 to the current form of the Duel Links game. Because Duel Links had just released less than a year before, it was still a very simple, straightforward game.
Also, I like how we use the Hearthstone term for recruiters
by adding newer cards like Xyz, Pendulums, and Links to the game. Now, I don't want to sound like those types of cards killed the game or they ruined Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I don't actually believe that. I like Xyz, I like Links, and I know others like Pendulums, though I don't.
Dude, I remember when Links came out, I was so upset. I thought it ruined the game. But only because of Master Rule 4. When they changed Master Rule 4 to allow Xyz and Synchros and Fusions to go into the main monster zones, then I was fine with Links. But before then, I hated Link monsters. And then after they fixed the rules on the extra deck cards, I was like, oh, Links are awesome, actually. I just don't like the Master Rule 4 restrictions.
Personally. But there is no debate that these things did move the game into
XYZ materials.
This new format would eliminate this from the equation. Should it do away with an extra deck completely? Maybe.
No.
It could. Or it could just have fusions. It could have synchros. It could have both. One way or another, it should be kept simpler. While the advantage...
I think one of the benefits of Yu-Gi-Oh! Over all the other card games is the extra deck as a toolbox. The extra deck allows you to basically deal with any board that's thrown at you because you have some kind of answer, which is available through pretty much any hand you draw, which is not the case for other card games.
Its format can continue to expand on its complex nature for those who love it. Because I don't think current Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a bad way to play the game. I just think it's really hard for new players to get into the game. And some of us, like me personally, I enjoy current Yu-Gi-Oh! I enjoy advanced Yu-Gi-Oh! But I love old school Yu-Gi-Oh! More. So give me something to play that's more like that, so I can play that as well as advanced if I want to. Doing this would allow GOAT and Edison players to have a new avenue to explore, with brand new cards being introduced, just like the advanced format, but with more of a retro feel. Konami could even branch this format into Master Duel, funneling players both from Master Duel to their new TCG format, and vice versa, which seems to be a big priority for them. If a former boomer player happens to stumble back into Yu-Gi-Oh! Through a YouTube video or finding their old cards, their current scenario is to try and play on the Master Duel ladder, get decimated on turn 1 by some crazy new meta deck, and then give up and leave. And they'll probably go to Twitter or to a YouTube comment and talk about back in my day, Yu-Gi-Oh! It took multiple turns, and they'll say something, generic that Yu-Gi-Oh! Boomers say. If Yu-Gi-Oh! Retro existed, these players would come back to Yu-Gi-Oh! And it would instantly have something to play that would remind them of the game they once knew. So they pick up their old collection, they look at Yu-Gi-Oh! Retro, and they go, huh, I remember some of these cards. What are these new cards, though? These seem pretty cool. They're not like pendulums or anything too crazy, but they fit in with these old school cards that I love. And I know because of all this talk of retro Yu-Gi-Oh, a lot of current players are watching this and thinking old school Yu-Gi-Oh sucks. It's much worse than advanced. This idea is dumb, Ruxin. But guys, if you're saying that right now, you're not who I'm talking to. With this being a whole other format, players who think that way could continue to play advanced. Like if you love advanced and you're like Yu-Gi-Oh! Retro,
this guy is bananas.
You don't have to play it. You could continue playing advanced.
I think he's spitting. I'm all for extra formats.
Releases for advanced. And then the players who listen to me say, oh, back in my day, we didn't have one-turn duels. Or back in my day, set pass was a great move. They hear this and they say, that sounds like a lot of fun to me. That would be really cool. That's what I'm talking about for Yu-Gi-Oh! Retro. This idea would also greatly improve the collectability of old.
What is Retro supposed to advertise to? By the time something like comes out, the GOAT player is going to be in their 50s. It's for the people who missed it. Like when Classic WoW came out in 2019, it was like 20 years after, well, 15 years after normal World of Warcraft came out. And there were tons of people who never got to play during the classic era of World of Warcraft, and they were super excited about classic WoW. Because they could finally relive it just like the other people did.
Older cards.
There's a lot of people who basically want to experience the nostalgia other people talk about all the time for themselves.
Since they have another format to be used in, old high rarity cards would be highly desired. So your ultimate rares from back in the day, your champion pack cards, your tournament pack cards that you want to use in GOAT, you want to use in Edison. Some of those cards would be sprinkled into Yu-Gi-Oh! Retro, and you could bring those cards over to Yu-Gi-Oh! Retro and play them there. I personally would not want to see like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Speed Duel print where you have to play the Speed Duel print in Speed Duel. I didn't like that they did that. You could play the Speed Duel in Advanced, but you couldn't play the Advanced in Speed Duel. That's why I like having some of the old cards in and then also printing the new cards, so that way they don't need to do that restriction. Because then you can use your old school cards in this new format, and it gives old cards another reason to be collectible. And later on down the line for Retro Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Yu-Gi-Oh! Retro, Starlights or Ultimate Rare original versions that were printed would have nostalgia of being a first print and being an early card in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Retro format, therefore making them more collectible, more memory.
Yu-Gi-Oh's dying since 2002. That's what I said as soon as I started these videos. Yu-Gi-Oh's always been dying.
All good things that people associate with these cards, which makes them collectible. And of course, I would highly recommend, if Konami does this, which I think there's about a 0% chance, but if Konami, if you're watching, do any sort of thing like this, if you do Yu-Gi-Oh! Retro, the format, or something like it, I would highly recommend making this where you do your high rarity, your ultimate rares. You put in all kinds of chase high rarity cards, like bringing back ultimate rares, throwing in ghost rares, doing starlight rares, doing whatever you're going to do with those really cool rarities. Put them in the retro format, because that's where the collectors are going to be buying product. They're going to be playing with the cards, and they're going to want those high rarity cards. They're going to change.
What's this? Konami has never had any PR, and that really mystifies everything. They never explain design philosophies of cards, sets, or bands. It's so annoying. The reason they don't do that, and I kind of like them for it, is because in the World of Warcraft community, the developers themselves will go on camera and like talk about design changes, and then the community itself will use that as an excuse to complain, and then they will use like the face of the developers to complain too, and everybody just like complains about the devs, you know, the people giving the information to us. And they do the same thing in like Magic the Gathering, but when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh!, since we don't know why they do these things or who does it, we just complain about the game as like a whole. And I think it just encourages a different kind of discussion. I don't know if it's better or worse, but it's different, and I like that. And also, we all basically just collectively go, what the hell does Konami thinking with these things? Because it makes no sense.
Case those things. It would be a lot like the Magic the Gathering collector boxes. Now, I know that there are some negatives to collector boxes being $1,400 or whatever. The good side is those things are really popular, and Magic is thriving right now. So if you're picking between product, like a secondary
Magic wasn't thriving last year. They like had a huge change around very recently. I don't want people to think Magic has always been doing good, because it hasn't.
Product being expensive or the card game dying, I think you probably pick the expensive product. Or if they wanted to do that specific split, like they could have Yu-Gi-Oh! Retro play boosters like they do in Magic. These have all the commons and the rare copies. But then in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Retro collector booster, like whatever they want to call it, because they're not going to use Magic terminology, you put in all those crazy rarities. You can even do serialized cards. I don't know if people want serialized cards or not. I think they're pretty cool, but they do inflate the price of the boxes a lot. So it's kind of a win-lose with that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If they do serialize stuff, I would definitely want them to be in a separate product versus the main product, because then it does bring up everything, so everything gets more. And continuing into why this would help the collectability, Konami would have an opportunity to print these new cards and archetypes in their new anime series that they've been doing. This gives them the chance to build on newer cards, not just the Blue Eyes and the Dark Magician Girls of the world, and make them more collectible down the line, which Yu-Gi-Oh! Desperately needs for the future. Why do we care about Blue Eyes and Dark Magician Girls so much? It's because we watched it in the anime back in the day, and the anime has slowly fallen off. Now there isn't even an anime. They've recently restarted with a little mini series anime, and I'm hoping that this can build into something bigger. But without the anime, it was really hard to connect to any of those monsters because you're not watching them and rooting for the duelist who uses them. You're not watching them pull off epic effects or anything like that. So there wasn't really a way to connect with the cards except by playing them. And because the advanced format's so complicated, people weren't playing, they weren't watching in the anime, and current cards just weren't as well remembered as those nostalgic old school cards. I think this would massively improve the collector and vintage player side of the game, but how would it impact the actual advanced format? Like Yu-Gi-Oh, if it's actually dying, you know, we got to fix everything, right? Here's how I think it would help the advanced format. Konami would finally be able to scale back releases, allowing each set to breathe and perform better. This is something that I talked about in my video a couple of years ago when product was also struggling. It also made a nice run, so it was good to see, and I'm hoping that'll happen after some of these videos. Like, some of the product just gets better and we don't have to worry about this. Just releasing too many boxes, and if you don't have time to make each box good, why do we even need those bad boxes? Like, maybe just combine them into less boxes. They could have one advanced release, core or reprint, then one Yu-Gi-Oh! Retro release, and vice versa. They could do this every month. One advanced release, then one Yu-Gi-Oh! Retro release on the next month. You do 6 releases for both a year, you alternate months, and there you go. 12 products a year. You're still pretty much pumping out the same amount of product overall, but half of them have become Yu-Gi-Oh! Retro. That way, both the advanced format and the Yu-Gi-Oh! Retro formats don't get too stale, but at the same time allow for developers of new cards to maximize potential of each new release, thus creating more desirable releases every time. Now, let's be honest. Even if Konami took this idea and they did exactly what I said, this won't completely fix Yu-Gi-Oh! But it is something that I would personally enjoy and think that could move the card game in the right direction. Make sure to let me know in the comments what you like about this idea, what you think I didn't mention that could be added to this, and what you think wouldn't work. Should Konami try something like this, or do you have a better idea? If you do, leave a comment down below and maybe someone Konami will see it. Who knows? Maybe a video like this can give them ideas on how to keep the game we love going.
You're missing a major issue here. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is dying, but not because of the value of cards in a box. It's because the game has power crept itself to such a high complexity level that it's unapproachable to new players. All games have players leave. They get bored or burned out or broke or outgrow it and whatever and stop playing. Other games handle this with new players joining, which this game and its every card a wall of text style makes unapproachable. When the first setup turn takes 5 to 10 minutes and the cards are overly complex, new players glaze over and head to Pokemon or Magic instead. I did this after just 10 years away from the game. It changed so much since the simpler, faster GOAT format days. A new format alone can't save that. They tried, but Speed Duel didn't remotely catch on at all. The power creep argument? There is merit to this argument. So let me tell you guys a little something about content creation. Did you know streaming is a solved science? So is making YouTube videos to an extent. Like, we know what this frame right here. We know what grows and what doesn't, and like it's all been solved, and the numbers say that the best way to grow is to focus exclusively on new viewers and just don't waste time on stuff that retains viewers. Because you will enjoy constant growth if you make your focus new player friendly or just new watcher friendly, which is why, like in my videos, for example, when I introduce a new card, I will explain what that card does before getting into like the topic of it. And this is something that was not common before I started doing it. And then everybody started doing it as well because it retained so many new players so easily. Go back up, please. No. So the new player thing is definitely true. However, I am not a new player, so it is in my best interest for the game to be even more complicated because that complication makes things fun. So, like, you know, I don't care if Yu-Gi-Oh! Becomes more new player friendly because it's not in my best interest. To do a snowball, don't be afraid to lose a bit of snow, I guess. Yeah, you need new viewers and new players in order to grow. Like, that is the best way to grow, is to focus exclusively on new viewers and new players for video games and stuff. Like, existing players don't matter because new players, that is a bigger target audience. It's just more people. There's always more people out there than are already on your thing.